Hey, Jor, let's get right into it. You are from 88 Sats Radio. I've gotten a lot of requests from people who want to talk, who want me to have a conversation with you, and I'm not surprised. I've been following your content for a while now. You've been posting consistently for so long. And one of your videos really stood out to me. One of your videos, it made me really think. You named it "Why Most People Aren't Buying Bitcoin." Do you want to go into that a little bit? Why aren't most people buying Bitcoin in your opinion?
Right off the hop?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were gonna have a bit of a warm up here. No, that's good.
No, right off the hop. We just go right into it, man.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on here. You've been doing some pretty incredible work yourself on the Twitter machine, which is good. We need more
Appreciate
Canadian.
it.
We need more Bitcoiners in general, but especially more Canadian Bitcoiners. So I appreciate you. Why most
Absolutely.
people aren't buying Bitcoin? I think the main reason, honestly, is because they think that they can't afford it. I think that the unit bias in Bitcoin is one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people. They see the price. It's gone from $5,000 4 years ago today almost, or a couple months before that, but $5,000 to what are we at now? 72,000. And I think when people see that number, they just kind of think that it's out of their grip now, and they're kind of sour about it. They're kind of mad about it. But they think, I don't have $72,000 kicking around. And here in Canada, we just hit $100,000 yesterday. And so that's even more. Like it's a very large number. And I've talked about this before, but it's like, think about the average person and think about how much disposable income they have every month. And think about how many months and years it would take for one person starting today to get to one Bitcoin. Like I estimate about 10 to 15 years for the average person. And it's not going to get easier either. So that's kind of the biggest hurdle. And I think that what I try to do is break it down and really let people know that you don't need one Bitcoin. I mean, if you can get there, it's going to be extremely rare, I think, in 10 or 20 years from now. But you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You can spend $10, you can spend $100. And the key, I think, there is just being consistent with it. And if you got $500 a month extra in savings that you put into the stock market or into your pension, just take a portion of that and just keep buying every month. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but over time, it adds up. And so to me, it's the unit bias in Bitcoin, which is that people think that they need to buy one Bitcoin. And if they can't buy one Bitcoin, then they're just going to keep ignoring it.
Yeah, I think you had a video on this. And back then, Bitcoin was around $90,000 or so. You were saying how um, people aren't able to buy one whole Bitcoin, of course, because it's next to impossible. How many people are earning $90,000 a year, right? Most people can't even. Most people can't even make ends meet right now, especially with how our grocery prices are going up. I actually went to Costco a few days ago. So this was a real life comparison that I saw. So I went to Costco a few days ago. The price of grass fed ground beef went from like $28.99 for a pack of 4 pounds, all the way up to, I think it's like $39.99 now. But then in terms of Bitcoin, it's dropped by 35%. Which I don't, people don't get it. Like the unit bias, they don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. They could be stacking small amounts. They could be buying $40 worth every week if they want to, $30, $20, $10 a week every week if they want to. And I know for a fact that that's going to add up. So
Yeah. And the other part of that too is like, if people just understood how valuable those are going to be, like what you're talking about, like one of the biggest misconceptions in Bitcoin, I think, is the fact that it's a get rich quick scheme. And I think it's been labeled like that on purpose by the people who don't want you owning Bitcoin. And so they kind of paint this brush on Bitcoiners as people who are trying to buy something and get rich and retire in a month or a year, whatever that is. And I think that it's the complete opposite of that. Once you actually spend some time with Bitcoiners and talking to people, everybody's here for like a very long time. Like you have to have a very long time horizon here. And one of my favorite lines in Bitcoin is buying Bitcoin for your last name instead of your first name, which
wow.
means that you're going to have it for, your kids, their kids, and their kids, and who knows how long. So just think about that. And one analogy that I use all the time, and I think this really resonates with a lot of people, but it's when people came over here, like being in Canada here, when people came over from Europe, like they crossed the sea, This landmass here, North America, Canada, US, it was just a bunch of land. And at that time, I compare that to Bitcoin in 2009, where there was all this Bitcoin. There's a huge supply of Bitcoin. There's hardly any demand for it. Nobody was using it. And it was the same back then. They came over here. There was a ton of land. There was no demand for it. So the value for like a whole, they called it townships back then, but let's say it was $1. And so at the time, there's lots of supply, very low demand, just like Bitcoin back in 2009. But then more and more people started showing up. And as more and more people started showing up, they moved it from a township to a section, to a half section, to a quarter section, to an acre, to a lot. And so I compare Bitcoin right now to be like a township back at that time where, you can get you can get one Bitcoin for X amount. It's a little bit more now, but we're just going to keep moving the decimal points, right? We can't create more land. We can't create more Bitcoin. All we're going to do is move from a Bitcoin to a sat, to a microsat, to a millisat, or whatever that is. It's the exact same thing that's going to happen in Bitcoin as what happened with land thousands, or I guess hundreds of years ago here. We're pretty new here in North America, but so in other words, if you can even get compare a sat to like a section of land, or like 1,000 sats or 1,000,000 sats, like it's just going to keep, as more and more people keep showing up, it's just going to go up in value as that demand goes up.
Yeah, and I think for Canadians, it's even more important because it seems like the political regime we have today is very intent on devaluing the dollar and making it more and more worthless every single day. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know if they're ready for the internet or not, but yeah, I mean, here in Canada, I really believe that Canada should be, if not the most abundant country, top 3 for sure. Like we have such great people here. We have so many resources here in Canada, and that's what the world runs on, is energy. And we've kind of been led to believe that energy is a bad thing, but energy has what built this house, what keeps the lights on, what heats the house when it's -10 here in Manitoba today. It's like you need energy to advance in civilization, and we have all this energy here in Canada. We just need an adult in the room who can unlock that. And the good news for you and I, and for all Canadians, is that there are. We talked about this before we hopped on here, but I said, like, as much as most people dislike Justin Trudeau, he's created a lot of great Bitcoiners in Canada just because of their policies. And so, when we have an adult in the room here and we unlock all this energy that we have and we turn that into Bitcoin mining, which I think Canada is number 3 right now, if I'm not mistaken, which is a good
Wow.
sign. We have no
Yeah.
gold. Trudeau sold all of our gold for some reason. Nobody knows why. But we're just barely hanging on there. But we do have Bitcoin, and I think that it makes me very hopeful for our future here, especially in Canada.
Yeah, and I think what Bitcoin is going to do is it's going to give us the ability to actually use our resources properly instead of wasting them, instead of having to um, sell our energy to other countries. We can. I was watching this. There was this great podcast where it said how I don't remember who it was, but they said how um, Russia might start selling their Bitcoin, their energy, all the energy that they produce to the Bitcoin network because other countries don't seem to. I mean, well, the U.S. doesn't seem to want to work with them. The UN countries don't want to work with them. Which, I mean, I don't blame Russia for doing that. I mean, I think it would probably be the best solution for them, right? And maybe maybe that's where Canada is going to. I know they don't have the same sanctions and all that different position, but I feel like just as a country, it may actually be very beneficial.
100%. And if you think about,
Yeah.
I'm sure that your audience is fairly well versed in terms of Bitcoin and mining and stuff. So it's like Bitcoin gives us the ability to capture what would be otherwise wasted or stranded energy. Like if you think about, and the funny thing for me is, like, before I got into Bitcoin, I knew nothing about energy or electricity or anything like
Same
that.
here.
I knew how to turn on a light switch, but that's it. But
Yeah.
since going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and all the different things that come with that, it's like I kind of understand it now. And I understand that, you produce electricity, whether that's through, in Manitoba here, it's hydro is our main one. It could be solar, it could be wind, it could be nuclear, but you produce that energy and then you have to find a buyer for it. If you don't use it, If your community can't use it, you have to find a buyer for it. And so electricity can only travel so far, right? And so we can't really sell energy here and send it to India, right? It just doesn't make sense. It won't get there. But with Bitcoin mining, it's the first time we've ever been able to capture energy directly and convert it into money, right? You don't have to find a buyer for it. You take that energy, however you get to it, and you hook up a Bitcoin miner to it. You start mining, and it basically prints money. You don't have to find a buyer for it. It prints money that is accepted and recognized on a global scale. Like it's truly mind bending when you actually stop and think about what's happening here.
Have you ever thought of Michael Saylor's analogy? I don't know if other people have said this, but Bitcoin is like a battery. Have you heard of
100%.
that?
That's exactly what it is. And
Yeah.
and here's another good analogy that I like to use is like if you think about the difference in batteries, everybody's used batteries in their devices, whether it's remote or mouse. Think about like the batteries that you buy on Amazon for like 100 batteries for $5. Think about how long they last. Think about how much energy is stored in those batteries. It's not much. And I compare that to the fiat system, where if you've used a solid battery where you charge it and it actually holds that energy in there for a very long time, you can come back 2 years later and you can hook something up to it and it's going to work. Like that's a good battery. And that's what Bitcoin is. It stores your time, your energy in the form of a battery. And then when you want to use it later, it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you. I just want to do a little pivot here.
Sure.
So you're a CPA, from what I know.
I was.
You were okay. You were. So what made you what made you start going into the Bitcoin rabbit hole? Because I hold the CFA charter holder. I hold the CFA charter. And in the finance industry, it's really weird for people to be talking about this imaginary money, magic internet money. What made you go into this rabbit hole?
That's it's funny you say that because I've been following you on Twitter and I've seen kind of your journey through the CFA and the CPA stuff and what you've gone through.
Yeah.
And it was the same kind of thing for me, honestly. I mean, it wasn't the same kind of like they didn't write me a letter or anything, but once I discovered Bitcoin, this was during the pandemic. It was 2020 or late 2019. I started with crypto, mostly just how most people get into it, which is you
Me
see
too.
it going up, right?
Yeah.
So I got into crypto and I was buying a lot of crypto and I was talking to my people at work about crypto and my bosses. And I was like, okay, well, this is the future of things. So we can either kind of, let it happen or we can get ahead of this and start talking to people about it. And I brought it up a couple different times and they looked at me like I had three heads. And then finally, there was a bunch of different things that happened in my end of my career there, including some mandates. But anyways, I ended up leaving, and I was there for like you. I went through 2 years of college, 2 years of university, 2 years of CPA. I was at a large accounting firm here in my local area for 10 years,
Wow.
and once I wrapped my head around, so that was early. So that was 2020. I was into crypto, and then it wasn't really until I started looking at money, history, and a few other things where I was like, okay, well, Bitcoin seems to make the most sense. Like the proof of work aspect of Bitcoin and the fact that you cannot create new Bitcoin, you can't print Bitcoin, and the money printer is what led us to all these issues in the world and
Mhm.
society. So I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and that's when I was like, okay, well, I need to be working in this. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I just know that I don't want to spend any more time in the fiat system. I want to focus on Bitcoin. And so it was a very tough decision, but to give up a 10-year career that you went through all this, like so much. I mean, it's not an easy thing to go through.
It's not.
And I just got to a point where I'm like, okay, I paid my CPA dues the first year because I was still kind of, I wasn't fully in. But then the next year they're like, okay, it's going to be $1,200 for the year. And I had no intention on using it that year or next year. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to retire my designation.
Yeah.
So that's what Bitcoin has done to me. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I haven't spent one day regretting it myself, but I just know where it's going, and I know the accounting industry is going to be shaken up by it. It's not going to replace all accountants, but between AI and Bitcoin, an honest, transparent ledger for the world, I do think that the accounting industry is going to be much different in 5 years. And that's one of the first things that I actually recognized with Bitcoin, is how closely it ties into the accounting world. And so I just said,
Yeah,
like, I don't want to waste any more time going down this road where I have no idea where it's going to lead. I want to be part of this Bitcoin movement. Don't know how, don't know, what it's going to look like, but here I am. That was back in 2021. So I'm still alive. The lights are still on. And yeah, and zero regrets about it.
great journey. I feel like it's so important. Hey, I was looking at so I was thinking about how accounting works. I have an accounting background, so I did finance. I have an accounting background. Do you think that Bitcoin is almost like a brand new accounting system? That's how I see it. Like I see it as just completely changing how we think of accounting. It's like its own double entry ledger where nobody can manipulate it. On the other hand, with the current financial system, the only reason why we need auditors, why we need all these like so much focus is on that accounting industry is because people can manipulate it, and on Bitcoin you can't. Once a transaction is sent, nobody can cancel it, nobody can stop it, nobody can manipulate the blockchain. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with every single word. I remember I was still working I worked at BDO. I don't need, I'm not worried about doxing myself. I worked at BDO. Great people. I miss those people every day. I miss the people aspect of it. I don't miss the work too much or the tax seasons. But I remember I was at BDO and I watched a video with Darren Feinstein. And he was, I think he was the founder actually or one of the founders of Core Scientific.
Oh, okay.
And he's an accountant. And
Core Scientific went bankrupt in 2022, right?
they
Is that the
did.
one?
And I was a share. I
Yeah.
bought
Okay.
a
Okay.
bunch of shares in Core Scientific
Oh,
after I watched this video, and they went bankrupt, and my shares went to about 1 cent. But they got revived, and I don't know if you've been following them at all lately.
I
They
haven't.
got bought up, and they're actually the shares are up from about, I think, 60 or 70% from when I bought them, because they've been using their data infrastructure between Bitcoin mining and AI.
Wow.
So they've actually taken a completely different route from when I first bought the shares. But anyways, that's a separate story. But I listened to this Darren Feinstein guy, and he's an accountant, and he was explaining how thousands of years ago we had single entry accounting, which was a farmer has 10 sheep, he writes it on stone, and the sun bakes it into the stone, and that's how he keeps track of things. One sheep dies, he crosses it off. Single entry accounting, right? And then years later, we moved into double entry accounting. I think this was maybe the 1400s or 1500s, where you'd still have the sheep, but you also keep track of, how you bought the sheep, your cash balance, who you paid for those sheep, like the liability aspect of that. And without getting to, putting people to sleep with the accounting talk here, that's been used for 500 years, the double entry accounting system. And so Darren said that Bitcoin is basically triple entry accounting, which means that it's the exact same thing, except it doesn't rely, as you said, the third parties, the auditors there, the people who verify those numbers. It's built into Bitcoin now, where the Bitcoin blockchain itself actually self audits itself every 10 minutes, every time there's a new block and the new ledger is sent out to all the nodes. That's basically triple entry accounting now. So in an industry that hasn't been innovated in 500 years, the Bitcoin is, I mean, that was the foundation for me that really opened my eyes to, like, okay, this makes a lot of sense here to me.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with money. With money, we haven't seen any real innovation for. I think it was Vijay Boyapat who was saying this for 5,000 years, right? I mean, we went from gold to IOUs, like paper IOUs, paper backed by gold, which really wasn't backed by gold.
Yeah.
We went to that, and then now we have a system where we don't need paper, and that on its own is just massive. This is I feel like this is changing so much of the world. I have a question for you. So I like asking this to my guests. What do you think is the most important downstream effect of Bitcoin?
Oh,
Like there's so many things that we're gonna do. I'll give you some time to think about it, but there's so many things that this can do. So many things this can improve. Like if you really think about it, the way that I see it, I don't want to skew
yeah, no problem. I
your
kind of
opinion on
already
this,
have one
but
in my head, so go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah, go ahead.
No, to me, it's like, I just feel like in the last 4 years of, everything we've went through in the last 4 or 5 years, it seems to me like people are, before that, myself included, really had no idea what was going on here, like none. And I feel like in the last 4 or 5 years, people have really opened their eyes to, okay, the media, the government, people kind of get to this point where they're like, okay, well, maybe everything I've been taught was a lie. And that's a very hard realization for people to come to. And I think that there's
Yeah.
a lot of people there right now. And so they're seeing the cost of groceries go up. They're seeing things with their eyes, and then the media is telling them something completely different from that. So most people are kind of at the stage where they're like, okay, well, there's definitely something wrong here, but I don't know what it is. I don't know how to solve it. But with Bitcoin, this is what I think it's going to do to the world. Because if you think of every single issue, anything, any problem we have in society, in the world, it all stems from fiat. It stems from the ability for somebody out there or a small group of people to create money out of thin air. And when they have that money, they can pay for government, they can pay for the media, they can pay for the pharmaceutical company. Like when you give a small group of people the ability to print money, it ends in what we see in front of us today. And so Bitcoin changes that. Bitcoin, you cannot print Bitcoin. It requires real life energy from the physical world, converts it into something digital that you can rely on, that you can trust. You don't have to audit the gold in the vaults. You don't have to audit the government and what they're spending. It just provides honesty, transparency, and everything changes from that point. So I can't really pinpoint one thing. I just think that if we think back to, you mentioned the different monies through the years, and this is kind of like how I think about it. So back in 1971, if you look at all the graphs, like, have you seen what WTF happened in
Oh, WTF.
1971?
Yeah.
So the crime's up, the birth rates are down, the food quality's down, the hospital visits are up. Every metric that we're seeing in front of our eyes right now started in 1971 when we went off a hard money. Right.
Yeah.
So this is a great resource, and I highly encourage people to check this out. It
Yeah.
just shows all the different graphs of like the metrics.
Yeah. And it just keeps going. That's the crazy thing. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And there's no lack of
No.
evidence that 1971 was. Keep going with what you're saying.
No. So to me, it's like, okay, back in 1971, what happened there was they took the dollar off the gold standard, which means they now had the ability to literally create money out of thin air. Before, whether they actually had the gold or not, that's a different story. People actually thought that they did. So what happened in 1971? Most people had no idea. Like Nixon came on TV, said that, they didn't say we defaulted on our debt, but we're going to move into this petrodollar standard. And so I think that at that time, 99% of people had no idea what was happening. They just slowly, for the last 50 years, have seen their lives get worse, right? And so I think now that we have Bitcoin, just like the exact same thing, 99% of people aren't going to really understand what's happening here, but we're going to move in the opposite direction, where people's lives are going to get slowly better and better and better, just because we're on a hard, scarce money standard. Bitcoin's the hardest money that's ever been existed. And so that's going to trickle down into every aspect of people's lives without them even really knowing what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one that I completely agree with everything you were saying. So the one thing that that really stands out to me is, I don't know if you've seen my rants on Twitter about real estate.
Yep.
I genuinely think that that's the biggest
biggest
thing, right? Because people no longer have to use real estate as a savings vehicle. They no longer have to put all this money into, they don't have to, first of all, they don't have to save 20% of the value of the house. Then they don't have to go to a bank and borrow the rest, the 80%. Then they don't have to pay back that 80% for the next 30, 40 years. Then, I mean, they're not buying houses. They're not buying more houses than they need. Have you seen the statistics about, I think in Vancouver, it's very similar. In Toronto, something like 60% of new build condos are owned by investors. That's crazy to me. That's absolutely insane. It's like we're not even catering to the end user anymore. It's all just financial. Like everything is money.
And if you think about, like, you're absolutely right. And if you think about why that is, like, why are people investing in real estate? It's because it's the best. We talked about the batteries. Like, it's the best place to store wealth right now.
Yeah.
right? It was before Bitcoin. But
Yeah.
if you had $100,000 and you wanted to make sure that you had that $100,000, the purchasing power of that in 10 or 15 years from now, like the housing market has gone up with inflation. So if you own assets, then you haven't been too affected by inflation, right? Because it's gone up. The value of homes have gone up with inflation, kind of at the same rate or above a little bit, you know. And so with the real estate too, I think that one thing that Bitcoin's going to do, and I think that the majority of people who own Bitcoin right now are millennials. And probably the next, there's people who are older than millennials who are looking to, oh, my BitX just restarted here. They're looking to preserve their wealth. But there's also Gen Z coming up right now, and they're looking at Bitcoin kind of like a get rich, like most people do. But I really think that there's a massive opportunity for Gen Z crowd right now to just understand that you're never going to be able to afford a house in this world ever. If you're saving your money in fiat, you're never going to be able to afford a house ever. And it's a sad reality. And I think that most people, kind of go under the assumption they haven't discovered Bitcoin yet. And so they're just kind of going through life. Every time they get paid, they blow it on something else, or they go out, or what kids do, but they don't have any sort of hope for the future. And I think that for me, when Gen Z realizes they can actually, instead of, trying to save in fiat for a house and putting it into a savings account and waiting to get to, as you said, 10% of the down payment, throw that into Bitcoin. Have some patience. Wait 4 years, wait 5 years, wait 10 years even. But you're going to see the price of homes, even though they're going to go up in fiat, the Bitcoin that you have is going to be able to buy way more than fiat. So I think that Bitcoin's like an actual saving grace for Gen Z right now, because instead of putting it into a savings account, buy Bitcoin, have some patience. And I think that's the only way that people are going to be able to afford a house nowadays is with Bitcoin.
I think the patience part is the hardest, because so I saw another one of your videos. You said, I'm just looking at your YouTube channel. You said you'll be tempted to sell your Bitcoin. A
Yeah.
lot of people are seeing the massive gains. They're seeing that they're up 4 or 5 times since the bottom in 2022. Why do you think people are going to be tempted to sell their Bitcoin? I mean, the answer obvious, but I want your thoughts just for my audience.
Yeah, no, to me, I really believe that people are going to be tempted to sell their Bitcoin because of BlackRock and because it's a scarce supply. So just think about this from BlackRock's perspective. The ETF came out in January 2024 this year. I think that changed everything forever in Bitcoin. But what's happening here is that BlackRock's and the other ETF issuers have been buying as much Bitcoin as they can. And so you have to understand that from BlackRock's point of view and their clients, they don't care what the price is. That it could be 50,000, it could be 70,000, it could be 700,000. They think of BlackRock as like unlimited capital. They don't care what it is. But
Yeah.
what they're trying to do right now is I don't know, there's theories around it, and I don't know if I believe it or not. But let's say they're trying to keep the price of Bitcoin down. The reason I think they're doing that is because they don't want people to see it going up. They don't want people to be interested because there's only so much Bitcoin available. That's the difference here between Bitcoin and any other asset that's ever existed. So what I think BlackRock's going to do here, because they understand that there's only so much Bitcoin and they can't print Bitcoin and they can't extort people into so what BlackRock's going to have to do here is they're going to have to run up the price so high to try to make people sell their Bitcoin, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to get Bitcoin, right? Because if you think about it, you can't print it. You can either buy it or you can either mine it. And so BlackRock's been buying up shares in these mining companies. I'm sure they have deals with, Marathon, with Riot to sell them Bitcoin, But outside of that, there's what is it, 450 Bitcoin a day right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's only so much Bitcoin. So what I think that BlackRock's going to do here, once the timing is right, is they're going to run up Bitcoin so high and make people sell their Bitcoin to them, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to get it. And they don't care what it's worth. You're dealing in one currency that they can print, or BlackRock can't print it, but can be printed, like a fake, illusionary, unlimited supply currency. They can take as much of that as they want and buy Bitcoin with it. One is real, one is fake. So I think that they're going to try to run up the price to tempt people to sell their Bitcoin. And that's the only way that they're going to be able to buy Bitcoin, because the exchange numbers have just been going like this for like since they started buying. And there's going to come a point where that supply runs out. And so that's when they're going to run up the price and they're going to tempt people to sell. And I think that a lot of people will. So I call it the BlackRock vacuum, because any Bitcoin you sell in the future is going to go right into BlackRock.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think that honestly, I don't think they're trying to keep the price down. I don't think
No?
they care about that.
Yeah,
I think the
I'm
way that I
kind of
see
with
it,
you too.
I agree with what you were saying where they don't want people to pay attention, but the way that I see it, there are so many people right now who own Bitcoin that have no clue what they own,
Right.
right? I'd say um out of all the people who own Bitcoin, probably less than 10% actually know what they have,
Oh, I'd say,
right?
yeah, I was going to say less than
Yeah,
1%, but
maybe
yeah, I
less.
mean,
Yeah,
same
that
idea.
makes sense.
Yeah.
0.01%. Yeah, 0.01% of the world. I mean, that makes sense. But the way that I see it, all these people who actually own Bitcoin, some of them own hundreds, some of them own thousands, however much they were lucky to buy back then. To them, it was just a gamble, right?
Yeah.
I've had so many conversations with people. They're willing to show you screenshots. Oh, I bought 20 Bitcoin back in 2016, and I know Bitcoin more than you. But no, you don't. You think it's a scam. You genuinely like. There's people who are telling me this thing's a scam. It's going to zero. I own some. I'm going to sell it 100,000. Like those are the people who are going. I have a feeling the way that I see it, because of these people, I think there's going to be a melt up in price because BlackRock is just going to offer more and more and more. Like you said, there's
100%.
unlimited money while Bitcoin is finite. Money, there's no limit to how much money can exist. But who knows? Who knows what will happen over the next few years? Who knows what will happen within the next decade or 2 decades? I have a feeling that Bitcoin is going to run up to the millions of dollars, right? And that only makes sense, right? Because you can print as much of the dollars as you want to, but you can't print any more Bitcoin. The supply is finite. There's no way to get people to give away their Bitcoin unless you offer them money, or I guess if the government just confiscates it. But even in that case, it would be a much better. It would lead to much more trust in the government if the prices rises and they don't confiscate people's Bitcoin.
Agreed.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
And that's kind of where we're going too, right? I mean, like in the last
Yeah.
week alone, we've seen, who was it? It was the BRICS nations. It was Argentina. It was the UAE. It was Ethiopia. And as you mentioned, Russia. They all announced that they're going to be mining Bitcoin.
Wow.
And so, we kind of see, and then you have corporations too. Like you see Microsoft, who just announced last week that their shareholders want Microsoft to be owning Bitcoin. And so that's like what we're looking at right now is a very small amount of corporations and countries who are owning Bitcoin, a small amount who are thinking about owning Bitcoin. But this whole thing's going to play out where everybody's going to want Bitcoin. This is, I say this all the time, but just understand that everybody is going to want your Bitcoin. Every individual, every company, every country, and most importantly here, I think, is every AI and every robot is also going to want your Bitcoin. And so that going back to what we talked about in terms of the unibuys, understand how scarce this thing is. Understand how valuable 100,000 sats is going to be when this whole thing plays out. And if you have the vision and if the foresight and the conviction to get to that point, like people who are in Bitcoin right now, whether they have one Bitcoin, 1 million sats, 100,000 sats, like nothing changes there other than the rest of the world. Bitcoin's going to reprice everything, right? And that's, Jeff Booth, Canadian, he completely switched how I look at things just by thinking like that. It's like it's not it is the measuring stick, because we've been valuing the world that we know of in houses and vehicles and all assets. We've been using the US dollar to value that. And the problem with that is that the US dollar is unlimited in supply, and we have no idea how much supply there is today and how much there's going to be in 10 years from now. So, how do you value things against a denominator that you don't really know what it is, right? Where if you compare it to Bitcoin, the reason why Bitcoin is repricing everything is because we know exactly how much there is today. We know exactly how much there's going to be in 10 years from now. The supply is not going to change. The denominator in Bitcoin, the supply is not going to change ever. And so the only thing that's going to happen is as countries, companies, individuals, and AI adopt it, the demand, the top part of that equation is going to go up, right? And so that's what's going to cause this massive spike in the price of fiat, but it's just going to reprice every other asset on earth. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. So have you seen this website before? I just have it opened up in the background here. Have you seen this website, Priced in Bitcoin 21?
No,
The site is awesome. It's amazing. It shows you the price of sorry, did you say yes or no?
no, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't. Oh yeah, check this website out. It's crazy. It shows you like the price of a house back here in November of 2011 in the US. It was 64,000 Bitcoin. Today it's 6 Bitcoin. That's crazy. It just shows you like if you look at it in fiat terms, it keeps doubling.
Yep.
It's going to keep doubling. It's going to keep increasing forever because more and more fiat can chase the same number of houses, right? And the way that I see it, I've talked about this before. The way that I see it is, in terms of fiat, the price of housing will keep increasing forever because fiat is easier to create than houses. But then in terms of Bitcoin, the price of a house will keep decreasing because Bitcoin is much more difficult to build or create more of than houses.
100%. That
And the
that
rabbit hole just goes so deep. This website is awesome. Like you can go through, you can see tons of different correlations here. Everything is dropping in price, right? Everything, literally everything. Even like if you look at this website, um, orange juice is a better investment than housing. Orange juice is down 29% in the last 5 years in terms of Bitcoin, while housing is down like 90 something percent.
what's that called? Price in Bitcoin 21.
Priced in Bitcoin 21.com.
I think that
Great site. I love it.
I think that the real estate one, like that completely melted my mind when I heard Jeff Booth talk about that. Real estate's one that everybody is familiar with, right? Like everybody knows
Yeah.
the price of housing has been going up, like
Yeah.
big time, especially here in Canada. Our markets are out of control. But you look at it in fiat, and then you look at it in Bitcoin, and that's just such a it's so easy to understand once you get to it, but like it takes a while.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it takes a while. It's probably going to take. I actually think. What are your? So we just saw the price of a house at 6 Bitcoin today. When do you think it'll go down to 1 Bitcoin in the US?
well, before I answer that, I got one thing I wanted to show you because this is something that I
Yeah.
came up with April 2024. So we talked about it's on Instagram, but we talked about the housing prices. So I'm a golfer myself, and
Okay.
I wanted to look at the purses. So you talked about real estate, orange juice, but like the purses of like if you win a golf tournament. In this case, I was looking at the Masters, and so this is what I found back in 2014 when Bubba Watson won the Masters. He won 1.6 million dollars US, and at the
Okay.
time it was 3,624 Bitcoin, right? So then you fast forward to 2024. I forget who won this year. Maybe Scotty, probably Scotty, but he won 3.2 million. So in 10
Oh, so
years,
it
it went
doubled.
from 1.6 million, the purse, to 3.2 million. It doubled. And in 2014, he won the equivalent of 3,624 Bitcoin. And in 2024, he won the equivalent of 50 Bitcoin.
Wow.
So to me, that's crazy. And you can look at anything like that, right? Housing, orange juice, the Masters purses, everything is going to keep getting more expensive if you're measuring life in fiat. But if you're living on a Bitcoin standard and you're measuring things in Bitcoin, everything's going to get cheaper for you.
Yeah.
So in terms of a house in Bitcoin, like people see that chart that you showed and it keeps going up, it keeps going down in Bitcoin. And people think, well, I've kind of missed that opportunity. But just understand that like 1% of the population owns Bitcoin. And as you said, 0.01% of people understand Bitcoin. So there's absolutely no reason for that number to go down. I think that one house in Bitcoin probably is going to be, I'd say within the next 5 years in the US, one Bitcoin.
Within the next 5. Wow. Yeah, I was thinking within the next. I think I was thinking I was actually pretty in line with you. I was thinking by 2030. So yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah. So I mean, what you were saying there, 0.01% of people own it. So you're ahead of 99.9% of people when you 99.99% of people when you really study it. I think the people who are watching your content, the people who are watching my content, it's just they're so far ahead of the curve, and they don't see
And
it
they
yet
don't even
because
realize it yet either. That's the thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they don't see it yet because the price seems too high. Again, unit bias. It just all combines to make this thing so much more difficult to understand than it needs to be. But I think anybody can do it. I literally think that anybody can understand how Bitcoin works. I think some of the people who have the deepest level of understanding of Bitcoin are not financial professionals. Just from seeing from people who post on Twitter, they're the ones who figured it out early too. Like for me, it took me what 3 years to really get it down, like to really understand it. I started studying in like 2020, kind of started figuring it out in 2023, and then August 2023, I was just all in. I was like, okay, yeah, this is the future. There's no way
Why do you think that is
anything else
though?
is going. Sorry,
Why do you think that is, that it's harder for people, some people to get it and some people not?
I think part of it is ego.
Ego's one, yeah.
Yeah, I like for me, just working with a lot of finance people. I have a
Yes.
feeling that a lot of finance people they do think that they know more than the rest of the world, and they think that oh that was me. I was like that. I'm not afraid to admit it. I was like that not too long ago. I thought that I knew more than people who told me about Bitcoin before. I was told about Bitcoin in 2000 and I think I first heard of it in 2010. Then
Oh,
I heard it so early, but I didn't do anything with it. I didn't do anything with the
yeah.
knowledge. I just thought, oh, this is complicated. I don't want to Google it. I don't want to spend the time doing this. It's a waste of time. It's not going anywhere. Then 2013, I was in university and I was doing my exams, and somebody talked about Bitcoin to me, and I said, oh, screw this thing. I'm not wasting my time on this. I'd rather have a career where I can earn more money than study this stupid thing. Then
Yes,
2017
exactly.
again,
Yep.
2017 I started a new job and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'd rather focus on my career instead of focusing on this thing that can't even do anything for me. And that's the time when I was doing the CFA. So I think there's a lot of people who are like that, a lot of people who just are ignoring it. They're not getting it. And that's the thing. That's our point. That's the point that we're trying to make here. Study it. You're not too late. You're not too late. Just study it. Get to it before the Bank of Canada. Get to it before the Federal Reserve. Get to it before all these institutions, because otherwise you're going to be paying You're not going to be paying $72,000. You're going to be paying $720,000. You're not going to be paying 100,000 Canadian dollars. You're going to be paying $1 million. Right. Right now you can buy 1,000 sats for $1 in Canada. A little bit less than that. In the future, you'll be buying 100 sats for $1, then 10 sats for $1, then 1 sat for $1.
Yeah, and at the start of every show I do, like I do a show every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, so your time, 9 a.m. But
Yeah.
and I show the metrics, and I call it the moose jaw time, because we know what the Moscow time is. $1 gets you X amount of sats. So the moose jaw time is a Canadian version. But I call it the deal of a lifetime, because, and I say it doesn't matter if it was 1,000 sats for $1. It doesn't matter if it's 1 sat for $1. It doesn't matter if it's zero point 0.1 sat for $1. You're still
Yeah.
exchanging fake money for real money, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as you can do that, it's literally the deal of a lifetime.
And you've been doing these live sessions for a while now, eh?
Yeah, I do. I do one every morning at 9 a.m. I
Amazing.
started about a year ago now.
Yeah. Amazing. So I heard from this is just completely off topic, completely separate topic. You were saying how you want to buy a golf. What's it called? A
Golf course.
golf course. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. You want to buy one. How's the process? How's the progress on that?
Uh, really good. I would say. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not close to it yet, but um, sorry. Just I want to say something about what we were just talking about. We'll put the
Of
golf
course.
stuff aside for one sec. Just going back to why people aren't there yet. I think that you said ego. I think it's also the education system, right? Like you and I both went through the world of finance. I minored in economics, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you took some economics as well. But it wasn't until I actually started studying Bitcoin on my own there I realized what money actually is and who has the ability to print it and
Yeah.
what's really happening here. So I think that the further you go into the education system and how many degrees you get and how many letters behind your name, the further you are away from Bitcoin, because they're teaching you completely different principles than what Bitcoin follows and what Austrian economics follows. So ego is a big part of it. I also think that people who aren't educated also don't have the brainwashing and the propaganda, um, the indoctrination that our governments and big corporations literally pay for, right? It's where curriculum,
Yeah.
that's where they come from. Somebody, Monsanto pays $5 million to the endowment of the university. They're going to get their information into the curriculum. Like that's how this whole system works. So, and it'd be the same with banks and credit unions and all that kind of stuff. Like they pay for the universities to keep going, but they get to decide what's being taught at the schools. So it's like that's why people have such a hard time with it. But anyways, to the golf course. Yeah, this was this was a very far-fetched dream of mine. That so let me start from the beginning here. So 88 Sats, that's what my channel's called, and that's where this whole thing started. It was called the 88 Sats Golf and Bitcoin Project. And so me and my little brother have a golf company called King Golf. It's on my hat, KNG Golf. And so we're big golfers. So once I understood the main premise behind Bitcoin and what's really happening here, I thought, you know what? If we could take some money now and sit on it, buy Bitcoin, sit on it for 10 years or more, I think like we could probably buy a golf course with that. So what I did, I started talking to some buddies. We posted it on our Instagram. Like, is anybody interested in this? This is kind of the vision for it. We want to buy this amount of Bitcoin. We want to put it into storage for a while. And in 10 years from now, we want to try to buy our own golf course. And so it was kind of a crazy thing, but it came to be. So we launched it. Within a couple months, we had 88 people. I wanted 88 people because it's like sizable enough where you can get a decent amount of Bitcoin, but it's not big enough where, it's going to be a worthless investment or just, so small. So I thought 88 was the perfect number. So within a few months, we found 88 people. I'd say 90% of them never heard of Bitcoin before, never owned Bitcoin.
Wow.
So what I did, I didn't want to take their cash. I said, you have to set up an account. You have to buy Bitcoin. You have to send it to this wallet. So they all went through the same process. And we ended up getting 88 people. We started a corporation. We set up a multi-signature wallet. And so the price at the time, it was about $17,000 for Bitcoin. That's when we launched it. So I posted about this yesterday, but so people were able to buy in at about $200. And I thought that was a really good number too, because it's like, okay, they don't really understand it. They see this golf course at the end of the road. If they lose $200, it's not going to make or break their life. They're not going to come, find me and hunt me down. So that's what a lot of guys said. They're like, well, it's $200. I go to the bar, I spend $200. Even if this fails, it's $200. But if it works, like imagine if this thing works. So people, I think, kind of grasp that. And one of the main reasons I wanted to do it is just to spread some awareness about Bitcoin and change the whole perception about, very short term, get rich quick, to see like the bigger picture here and how this whole thing I think is going to play out. So anyways, people paid, I think it was $200 for a share. And as of yesterday, when we hit $100,000 here in Canada, the shares were worth $901.
Wow.
So we launched it January 3rd, 2023. So in less than 2 years, it's 4x.
Yeah.
Same as it's directly tied to the price of Bitcoin, right? So it's the same as Bitcoin.
Yeah. And it's eventually going to 40x, going to 400x.
Yeah. And
it'll
so
keep going.
We almost have, I don't really want to dox the amount that we have, but
of course,
if you did some math on it, you could probably figure it out. But I do think that, and a lot of my buddies and the people in the network, think that we're going to buy this municipal course or like this small town course. And I'm thinking like, if we wait 10 years, like we might be able to buy like a Pebble Beach or like a big one. I mean, Pebble Beach might be a little bit out of range, but that it's going to be the exact same thing as the chart for real estate. Like look at the price of a golf course. Even though it's gone up in fiat, it's going to keep going down in terms of Bitcoin. So I think that, having that long enough time horizon, and people, buying into that. The nice thing about it is there's 88 people and it's very decentralized. So there's not like, I don't get to say what course we buy, when we buy it. It's like people vote on it, right? So if 45 people want to buy this golf course, then that's what we're going to do. So, and I love telling that story to people because I think that there's so much opportunity for people in their own lives, whether you like golf or whether you like, karate or pickleball. Like if you look at that and you can find, if you can convince people and sell this idea of the future and what this is going to unlock for people, you can do that. Find 50 people, find 100 people, find, whatever it is. Put some money into a fund, learn how to protect it. They educate themselves and just go on with a long enough time frame and say, in 10 years from now, we might be able to build a new rink for our community here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's huge. I think that's what brings so many people together with Bitcoin, with the fact that people have so many different diverse backgrounds. They have so many different ways of thinking. Like every single podcast that you see, somebody has a different experience, or every single podcast you listen to, everybody has a different experience.
Yes,
Everybody
exactly.
thinks of it differently. Everybody, like, there are people who think that Bitcoin is going to $100,000 in 10 years, and there are people who think it's going to $100 million, right? There's so many different perspectives, so many
And
different
nobody
ways
knows
of
for
thinking.
sure.
That's exactly it, right? Everybody has a different perspective. Everybody wants to think of it differently, and that's the beauty of it, right? Bitcoin. So, do you know who Matthew Kratter is,
Yep.
by any chance? Bitcoin University. So he says, Bitcoin is money for enemies. I think other people say this as well, but it stood out when he said it because whether you like golf or I like hockey, maybe we hate each other, we could still work on this one goal of accumulating Bitcoin. And
100%.
you can learn about it from different people. You can learn about it from different people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of thinking. I think the fact that you're spending this Bitcoin on something that you really love, and you're delaying gratification to get to that point, that's the beauty of it.
And you're absolutely right. And I think the other part of it too is like if we were to take 88 people and I said, okay, we want to buy this golf course in 10 years, right? And so everybody's going to have to send in $100 worth of fiat every month. And 10 years later, we might end up with like $300,000, $400,000. By that time, the price of a golf course is going to be probably double. Like it's so unattainable in fiat world
Yeah,
to even think about something like that, right? It's just
yeah,
so out of our possibilities as humans. But when you flip it on its head, and that's what Bitcoin does, it literally flips everything on its head. And you look at it differently and you say, okay, well, we take this small amount now. It's not going to be a monthly or an annual thing. We're just going to wait because everything is going to be repriced by this asset that we're holding, including golf courses. And so if we
yeah,
wait long enough, who knows what could happen? It's a possibility, right? And in
yeah,
fiat, there's no possibility there.
yeah. I want to actually show you something else, that same website, priced in Bitcoin 21. I think you're gonna love this. This is actually this blew my mind. So in terms of Bitcoin, the average Canadian wage has dropped from, let me turn this into Bitcoin instead of sats. So in terms of Bitcoin, the average wage has dropped from 13,000 Bitcoin annual wage all the way down to less than 1 Bitcoin. That's crazy to me. Like that, it blows my mind.
That's what I mean, though. And even earlier in the show, I said Gen Z right now has no chance of buying a house. And just think of it like buying
Yeah,
a golf course. It's the exact same. You could save as much as you want. You could work as hard as you want. You're never going to be able to afford a house if you're saving in fiat ever. And so if
yeah,
you flip that on its head, you say, okay, well, I might, I have to work as hard. I don't have to save as much. But if I'm storing my money, my energy, my time in Bitcoin, there's an actual realistic chance that I'm going to be able to buy a house in 10 years from now.
yeah. And the worst case scenario, sorry, the best case scenario if you're saving in fiat is you
Keeping up with
can maybe
inflation.
save for a down payment.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, what was it? You can save for a down payment, and then you can go into 30 more years of having to make payments and just stick to that forever. Like you're never gonna get out of it. You're gonna be paying. You're gonna be making payments forever because what you're gonna do is you're gonna buy a house. You're gonna buy what you can afford today, and then a few years from now, your house starts feeling small. You'll have paid mostly interest in that time on that mortgage. You'll barely have built any equity, and now you're moving to another house and you're paying even more interest. Then you move to another house and you're paying even more interest. I think the average time that people stay in a house is what, 8 to 10 years. I was looking at some statistics, which
Max, probably.
it,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me because in that 8 to 10 years, like 80% of your payments are going towards interest, right? And
Most people
I
don't
don't
even
know,
understand
people,
that. It's
they don't
sad. It's
see it.
like you see your mortgage is worth you see the price of the house is worth like say $500,000, and you're like, okay, well, it seems doable. But then once you factor in your interest payments into that after 20 years, you paid over $1 million for that house between interest
Yeah.
and principal.
Yeah. And okay, so I have one last question for you, another pivot here. So your top video, the top video that you have is I don't know if I don't know if you're expecting this question. So it's sell your Ethereum while you still can. Why do you say that? I think that was a great, like the timing of that was perfect. It was what, 5 months ago,
Yeah,
and
look at the
in this
chart.
time,
Yeah.
I'll pull up the chart. But why do you say that?
So the funny thing about that is I posted that video and I had a bunch of comments from Ethereum bros
Yeah,
on YouTube. And one even went as far as it was actually kind of smart or sneaky. But what somebody did was they must have used AI or just like they took my email address because I'm pretty public with my email address. I like talking back and forth with people.
yeah.
But they took my email address and they subscribed me to probably 500 different lists. So
Wow.
I checked my email the next day and I had like 1,000 emails in there. And I had to go through and unsubscribe to all those. So I don't want to give anybody ideas here, but that's like the kind of people that we're dealing with here in the Ethereum world. So, anyways, there's the chart there from Bitcoin to Ethereum, and it's the exact same with housing, with golf courses, with wages, with Ethereum. Everything is going to be repriced by Bitcoin. Everything's going to trend towards zero against Bitcoin. And I could sit here and list the reasons why I think that, but I think that the main reason for me, well, okay, maybe I'll talk about a few of them. So number one, Ethereum is centralized. They have a CEO. Everybody knows who he is. He's a weirdo. Vitalik Buterin is his name. But they have a CEO. It's centralized. So if something happens to him, you know, it's the same as anything centralized. It can be taken down. If you know who the CEO is, that's
Yeah.
why I love Bitcoin, is because nobody knows who Satoshi is. I hope we never find out who Satoshi is, because when you can't cut off a head, it becomes so much more powerful. So that's Ethereum. It's centralized. Second part of it too, utility wise, it was great for a while when people were using altcoins, meme coins, sending it around. Ethereum served its purpose. But since then, it's been replaced by Solana. So even if you're a believer in like the technology itself, like Solana is a better option now. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it's easier to use. The other part of that too
And
is
there's always gonna be new ones. There's always gonna be new coins like this. Like there's always gonna be new ones. Cardano, all the shit coins that are coming out. Caspa, Nano.
100%. And so the other part of that too is the supply. Like Bitcoin has a fixed supply. Ethereum's roadmap seems to change every year. And so you can't put too much stock into something. It's very similar to our fiat dollar in terms of if you don't know how much there's going to be in 10 years from now, you can't truly value things off of that. With Bitcoin, you can. And the last one and the most important part of the whole equation here is that Bitcoin is proof of work, Ethereum is proof of stake. So
Mhm.
for those who don't know, I'd spend some time trying to figure out the difference between those two. But the main thing for me is that you can't create more Bitcoin. You can create more Ethereum, right? Because
Yeah.
with proof of stake, if 10 people own 60% of the Ethereum, they can change the code. Because of their stake, because of their holdings of Ethereum, they can change the code. They can fork it. They can do whatever they want with it. With Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. And a lot of people get concerned about like BlackRock centralizing Bitcoin. They can't. Bitcoin's not based on proof of stake. It's not based on who owns how much Bitcoin. It's based on how many people are running Bitcoin nodes. Every node is a vote in the network. And so BlackRock could own 20% of Bitcoin. They still can't do anything about it. There's still just
Yeah.
one node in the network. So those reasons alone. And the last thing I'll say about that is that there's a lot of people who own Ethereum right now, and they think they bought it at, let's say, $4,000 back in 2021. It's at $2,500 right now. They're waiting for it to get back up to the fiat price before they're gonna sell it. But if you're flipping it into Bitcoin, you have to do it now because that chart's only going to keep going down and down and down. So even if you get back up to your fiat price in Ethereum, you're still going to get way less sats than you would have if you sold it 5 months ago or today. So don't
Yeah.
worry about the fiat price. Don't think about that. Look at it compared to Bitcoin because that's the real measurement here.
And I want to show you another quick website here. I think this is going to be. I think this is going to really prove your point here. So let's see. So this is the supply of Ethereum. Look at that number. Just keeps going up.
and there's no consistency there. You look at the Bitcoin
Yeah.
supply; it's
Yeah.
perfectly. We know what there's going to be in 50 years from now.
Yeah. Let
So
me actually show you. So I created a supply schedule for Bitcoin. I know my audience might have seen it, but there are definitely people who haven't seen it. But this is essentially the supply of Bitcoin, and it's fixed. It's fixed for forever. Nobody can change it, right? It just the supply, the subsidy is decreasing by 50% every 4 years, every cycle, every 220,000 or 210,000 blocks. It's decreasing, and eventually there will be zero Bitcoin being produced by 2140. Nobody can change that. BlackRock can't change that. MicroStrategy can't change that. Nobody can change that. On the other hand, with Ethereum, as we just saw, the supply can increase at some point. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody knows for a fact. When the merge happened, people were actually telling me, "Oh, you're buying into this thing that the supplies is going to keep increasing, and nobody's going to be able to decrease it." But now what's happening with Ethereum? That's exactly what's happening. Nobody can decrease it, and I think the ETFs are part of the reason for why the Ethereum supply just keeps going up, because the ETH that they're holding can't be used. It can't be spent. So what that it's a spiral, and it's just going to keep
it's a
getting worse.
nightmare. It is really.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So just looking at that spreadsheet there, and I love that
Oh,
you're a guy like me. I love spreadsheets. I show them on my show all the time because it's very easy
yeah,
to see visually instead of just me talking. But like,
yeah.
think about that. So you look at your supply there, and I mean, you can dive into it as much as you want to. The one that really stands out for me, um, I think it's 2064, if I'm not
2064.
mistaken.
There you go.
So
Why is that?
2064 is the first time that it's less than one Bitcoin per day. Is that right?
Oh no, it's 2060.
2060.
I
Right.
actually highlighted that one. Yeah,
There you go.
stood out to me too.
So that to me is within our lifetime. Like we can look at 2134 or whatever it is. Like we're probably going to be dead and gone by then. But like 2060 is a
2130.
realistic chance we're still alive by then.
Yeah,
And at that point, the whole world, all the energy on Earth is going to be fighting over one Bitcoin per day,
yeah. Less than one, not even one.
less than one.
That's crazy.
And
And then
so,
in
no,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say 2032, same thing. Less than one for the block subsidy.
Yeah. It's a big deal. And I mean,
Yeah,
even the
huge
epoch that
deal.
we just crossed this year, it officially made Bitcoin the hardest asset because the inflation rate of gold is 2%. And after this epoch, Bitcoin is less than gold for new supply every year already. And we're only 15
Yeah,
years into this thing. So
yeah,
the one thing though that I did want to mention is like with this spreadsheet, like it looks great. I mean, it's very reliable, but just I want people to really understand why it's important to know how much there is today and how much there's going to be in 50 years from now when you're trying to value assets based on something, right? It's very
yeah.
important to know the supply, the bottom line there. And the other
Hmm.
part too is like with Ethereum, if Larry Fink wanted to come out and spend unlimited capital, which BlackRock has, and they wanted to buy 60% of the Ethereum, they could do that. And with proof of stake, they would be able to change the whole code, the whole everything about it. They could change the whole roadmap. With Bitcoin,
Yeah,
Larry Fink, if he could, it'd be very difficult. But even if Larry Fink decided to buy 60% of the Bitcoin, it still would not matter. He would still not be able to change anything within Bitcoin.
yeah,
That's the most important part, I think, for people to really understand.
yeah. I definitely agree. So I have a couple of estimates here. So I think this is pretty conservative right here. So I guess I estimated in Epoch 5, the maximum price will be 250K. I think it'll go higher, but this might be conservative. And then 2028, I estimated that the lowest price in that cycle, so I guess the bottom for this cycle will be 100K. Any thoughts on that?
I think 100K is a big number, actually. I think that
Yeah,
once we get to 100K US dollars,
yeah,
that's when the majority of people are going to start giving a shit, right?
yeah,
Because they kind of see it now as like, okay, Bitcoin's at 70,000 bucks, cool. It was at 68 4 years ago. Like that's not a big deal to people, right?
yeah,
Even though it's gone up 100% this year, and depending on when you bought it, when you got into Bitcoin, but like all they think about is the all-time highs, and they compare this one to 4 years ago. But I think
Yeah.
once we hit that $100,000, that's when the majority of people are really going to start FOMOing into Bitcoin, and that's when it's going to go from 100 to 200 to 300 to a million faster than we can even imagine.
Yeah. And you know what the funny thing is? It's usually so I'm going to go to the supply, I mean the map, sorry, the chart there. I just want to show you something. I know you know about this. I don't think other people do though. I think one of the crazy things here is that people say that Bitcoin's previous all-time high was at 69K,
Mm-hmm.
but it was barely there.
Yeah, it was there for like a day. Hey,
It wasn't even there for a day. It was there for a few minutes, right? Because it was a blow off top, right? People just got greedy and they started buying as much as they could, and the price hit that. But like the difference is that right now we've been at that level for days, weeks,
yes,
right? Like if
and
you
that's
compare it
important.
here, right? That's what people don't understand. I think that's the thing that people have a very difficult time wrapping their heads around. Like at that time, Bitcoin was there for a few minutes, maybe. This time, Bitcoin's at 69,000, 60,000 or above for 8 months, right? And now we have that anchor where people think, okay, Bitcoin is at $60,000. That's the fair market value, and that's not going to. It's only going to go up from here. If you're rational, that like if you understand how Bitcoin works and you're a rational investor and you really think about where this is going, it makes no sense to think that this is going lower or people are going to be losing money or whatever people think. It makes no sense to me, to be honest.
And here's the thing too, like if you consider where we were in 2020, like who was buying Bitcoin at that time? It was people like me and you.
Yeah,
But you fast forward 4 years, and all of a sudden Wall Street's here, and then you fast forward 4 years from now, and all of a sudden state pension funds are here, and countries are
yeah,
here, and people have to understand that those Bitcoin, once they get into those wallets, they're never moving.
yeah,
Because once they get into like a
yeah,
pension fund or an investment fund, state pension fund, countries are holding them, they're never going to move out of there. So that the floor that we're building here is 1,000 times more solid than it was back in 2020. And it's only going to get more solid as serious investors come into the space, that they're going to buy Bitcoin and they're going to hold on to that Bitcoin for longer than we are around on Earth,
yeah,
probably, right? So
yeah,
with a fixed supply and buyers like that with a very long term lens of this thing, the floor is astoundingly solid, which we did not have in 2020.
yeah, yeah. It's like building a foundation with sand versus with concrete, right?
100%. Yep.
We're building a foundation with concrete. That's what happened here. This is the concrete being laid down, and this was the concrete being laid down right here, and then this was it settling,
That's a great way to look at it.
right? Like it's and the settlement is what the settling of the foundation and just having it build and solidify is the key. If it doesn't solidify back here, people tried to build it up to this point, but it was built on sand,
Yeah.
right? It
And a
was built
gust of
on
wind blew it over.
retail. It was built on retail FOMO essentially. That's where this price came from. I mean, I don't even think it should have gotten up to that high. But I mean, again, with FTX, with all these
The China
shit
mining
coins,
ban was in there too, I think.
I think that was here, right?
It
That was
was
here, and then
yeah,
Elon,
sometime in 21.
yeah, right there, right there. So this one right here, and then Elon said that he would accept Bitcoin for Teslas in July 2021, and it started skyrocketing again. But then again, I mean, it wasn't really built on anything. It wasn't built on people really wanting Bitcoin. It was built on people
Speculating.
thinking that the value will keep going up. That's it. They just thought the price was going to keep going up. They didn't understand the fundamentals. I mean, I still don't think most people understand the fundamentals. But with the ETFs, they trust BlackRock to do what BlackRock is going to do. So I think because of that, they're going to keep buying. But then there's also the fact that this time is the first time where anybody can get access to this thing. Anybody, literally anybody, can go ahead and buy it in their brokerage account, in their accounts, and now they don't have to rely on a scammy company like Coinbase, right? They can just rely on who they trust. They can obviously buy it in their own cold storage. I mean, I wouldn't even suggest that. I wouldn't suggest buying the ETFs. I personally don't hold any of the ETFs. I just have Bitcoin in cold storage. But I think that this cycle is different. People think, oh, history just repeats itself over and over again, but this cycle is different. It's not the same thing. I have a feeling like there's times when I think, man, like what if Bitcoin just goes up? We have these consolidations, then it goes up again. Then we have consolidation, then it goes up. We have consolidation, goes up. We have a consolidation, goes up, and it just keeps doing that
That's what's going to
like a
happen.
staircase,
Yeah,
right?
100%. And
Exactly like a staircase.
for me, it's like, okay, well, the one metric I love to use outside of fiat is the hash rate. Like
Mm-hmm.
and people hear hash rate and their brains automatically turn off. But basically, all hash rate is the amount of energy, the amount of electricity going into the Bitcoin network. So if I have a miner here and I plug it into the wall, that increases the hash rate. If I unplug it,
Yeah.
look at that. So with this, and I think this is important because I wrote something about this morning actually. And so I was looking at the hash rate. We just hit an all-time high on the 28th of October, 2 days ago, 798 exahash per second. So all-time
Wow.
high, the most electricity that's ever been in the Bitcoin network before. And the price is 72,000. And if we look back to, speaking of paper houses, if we look back to November 2021, the price was 69,000 and the hash rate was, can you go to all there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, let me go to it. So 2021, it was like here.
I had
Oh, let me zoom in.
171 exahash per second. Does that sound right?
Let's see. Somewhere there? Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. So about
100,
120, 171.
Oh no, you're right. About 150, 170.
So if you're like me and you think that the hash rate is kind of like the main metric to be using for Bitcoin and where it should be, so that's a 4.6x. So from 171 exahash per second in 2021 to 798 exahash per second in 2024, that's a
Yeah.
4.6x. So just by those estimations alone, the hash rate, based on the hash rate today, the price should be 317,333 US dollars. All
Yeah.
things being equal. But then you have to keep in mind here that they're not equal. Since 2021, the individual adoption is up, the corporate adoption is up, nation state adoption is up. And so if you think about that, like based on the hash rate there, $317,000, that's what the price should be today. If it was directly correlated to hash rate, which I think is the best metric to use.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be that today plus higher.
Yeah.
So then you kind of think about, like, on my show every day, one thing I like to do is look at the price today, last year, and at this time 4 years ago, because the halving cycles are a big deal in Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So
This
today the
time 4 years
price
ago.
of Bitcoin, and everybody talked about October, and everybody's kind of been waiting for the price to really shoot up here. But the price today is 71 or 72,000. 4 years ago on this day, October 30th, 13,000.
Wow. I was actually just trying to find it here.
Yeah. So look at October 30th, 2020.
October 30th. There you go. Yeah, 13,000.
13,000. So what that tells me, and if you look back even further, if you look back in earlier 2020, before the halving, I think it was about $5,000.
I think it dropped to 3,500 at one point. I wanted to buy some, but I was like, no, this is going lower.
There it is.
Oh yeah,
So
there was that candle. It dropped all the way down to like 3,800, and then it went all the way up to 6,000. You were right, 5,000 or so.
so that was before the halving, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
think about that. 4 years ago, we're going through the same thing now. So it went from 5,000 before the halving, and then in January the next year, February, whenever it was, that's when it got up to like 60,000, or it might have been later in the 2021. But
I
so
think
it
it was
went from
April. Oh yeah,
5,000
April.
to 60,000 in
Yeah,
less than a year. So what is that? 12x?
12x. Yeah.
And so we're kind of just getting into the part where that's really going to pick up now, because 5,000 to 13,000. I hate saying a bunch of numbers out loud, but 5,000 to 13,000 pre-halving to this point 4 years ago, and then up to 60 or 65. So we've just kind of been going through the halving hype, the summer, the dullness, and I think that we're really ramping up here. And that was all before Wall Street was here.
Yeah.
It 12x before Wall Street even showed up to the party here.
And the way that I see it, Wall Street investors are some of the biggest gamblers in the world. So the way that I see it, they're gonna take on massive leverage, and maybe that's what's going to lead to the next drop. Maybe it won't drop as much as it did in the past. In the past, it's dropped, 70-80%. But I think what's going to happen is all these Wall Street investors are going to take on massive amounts of leverage. They're just going to keep thinking it's going to keep going up, keep going up. I mean, it will. It eventually will, but it's the time preference, right? If people are taking on short-term bets with 100x leverage, then of course they're going to get wrecked,
Yes.
right? And they're going to be, these Wall Street investors are going to get so confident. I guarantee it.
Because
They're
they
going
don't
to
really
see it as,
understand it, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, man. That was really informative. I love that conversation. Hey, any last thoughts for my audience here? Any last points of
Uh,
value?
yeah, the one thing I would say, and I'm not sure who your audience would be, but this is maybe I'll talk to two different types of people here. Number one is the people the pre-coiners, right, who aren't here yet.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is that a lot of people I talk to about Bitcoin, and this is just my day-to-day life, but they say, I don't understand Bitcoin. I want to understand it better before I buy any Bitcoin. I think that we're kind of past the point of that now. I think that if you are watching this as somebody who doesn't own Bitcoin yet, I think the best thing that you can do is take whatever cash flow you have, like don't take on debt, don't spend money that you need for food and rent and stuff like that. But any amount that you have free cash flow, buy Bitcoin today. Once you have some skin in the game, you're going to be paying closer attention. You're going to start going down different rabbit holes. You're going to educate yourself a little bit more. Learn how to protect that Bitcoin. I mean, you don't have to go crazy with it. Just put it into a wallet, take it off the exchanges, and then just educate yourself. Learn, keep studying. And the more you study, the more you're going to want to study more. And then just set up like a monthly buy, whether it's $20, $50, $100. Just keep doing that consistently. And over time, you're probably going to start moving more of your assets into Bitcoin. But you just have to start. Don't wait to try to understand it, because we've both been in here for 4 or 5 years now, and I'm still learning new stuff every day. Like, this rabbit hole never ends. So
Every single day,
never.
new things.
So just buy some today, take it off the exchange, keep learning, and then just keep buying more of it. So that's what I would say to people. Don't try to wait to understand it, because you're never going to fully understand it. Just understand that the fiat dollar is melting fast, and this Bitcoin thing is going to store your time and energy better than anything else can. So that's what I would say to people who don't have Bitcoin yet. And for the people who do, just really understand what you're holding here, and understand how valuable it is today and how valuable it's going to be in 100 years from now, and do everything that you possibly can to protect that Bitcoin. Find ways, and I think the misconception with a lot of people is that they can, get to 50 million sats and then they're going to be set, then they can retire. Just understand that for the rest of your life, you're going to be trading your time and energy for Bitcoin, whether you're earning fiat and exchanging it for Bitcoin, or you start earning Bitcoin. But just because you have a goal of this doesn't mean you're going to stop and start focusing on fiat again. Like, once you leave that, you're gone there forever, right? Once you see it, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. So just understand what you're holding, learn how to protect that, and also understand how valuable the knowledge that you have in your brain is right now. Because what's going to happen here is the last couple of years, probably since people have started learning about Bitcoin, is that the companies within Bitcoin, whether they're a Bitcoin company or they're just a company who's holding Bitcoin on their treasury, they haven't been doing much in terms of hiring, marketing. They've been buying Bitcoin. And once the price goes up, they're going to have so much more purchasing power to use that, right? Like, there's going to be companies who you've never heard of before that have been stacking Bitcoin for the last 4 years that are just going to be growing like crazy once the purchasing power goes up. So understand that there's 30 million companies on Earth. All of these companies are going to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. All of these companies are going to need to know how to do that. And if you're somebody out there who's been watching podcasts, watching videos, you have a ton of knowledge that's invaluable right now. And all of these companies are going to need a head of Bitcoin strategy. So buy Bitcoin, learn how to protect it, focus on earning Bitcoin, and understand how much knowledge you actually have inside your brain and how valuable that's going to become in these next couple of years here.
And of course, watch this video right here. Don't be tempted to sell.
True,
do not be tempted.
because a lot of people will be.
Yeah,
And the last thing that
absolutely.
we want to happen right now is for you to sell your Bitcoin and it goes into the BlackRock vacuum. We need to keep Bitcoin for, I mean, Bitcoin's for everybody, Bitcoin's for enemies, but Bitcoin is also for the little guy. And the people who can
Yeah.
get into it now, you're going to have so much influence into the future that you're not even aware of yet. So just get through it. You could sell me a million paper houses for one real house. And are you going to take that bet? Are you going to take that offer? No. It's the exact
No.
same as a million fiat illusionary dollars for one Bitcoin. Just understand what you're holding here. And if you do need some money, there's going to be banking options where you don't have to sell the Bitcoin. You don't have to worry about the tax consequences of it. You can take it, leverage it, use it as collateral, buy a new quad, whatever, and then use your Bitcoin to make the payments. Like, don't ever think that you're going to move your Bitcoin into fiat again. It doesn't make any sense to do that. So,
Yeah. If anything, exchange it directly for goods and services. That's the way
exactly.
that's the way that I see it. I also see Bitcoin as just a savings account. Don't you don't need to um like you don't need to think of it as an investment, because it's not. It's a savings vehicle. It's
Right.
just a way for you to save with certainty into the future, 20, 30, 50 years into the future. It's just a savings vehicle. Everything else is an investment. I think that's the thing that people don't quite understand here. And once we get that point across, is when a lot of people benefit from this thing. So,
I mean, just going back to that, because one thing I
Mhm.
did recently is I downloaded the Aqua Wallet, like it's from Samson Moe, his company, Jan 3.
Oh, nice.
And so the Aqua Wallet itself, I love how they did it. They have Lightning and Liquid on there, and they consider that your checkings account. And then they have
Mhm.
like Bitcoin. If you're keeping it on layer one, if you have a UTXO, they call it your savings account.
Mm.
So I like to think of like Lightning, Liquid, checking account, layer one on like an app, like an Aqua Wallet as your savings account. And then like your cold storage. I mean, you can kind of mix these two up, but the cold storage, that's stuff that's going to be on there for the rest of your life and for your kids'
Yes,
life, right? So I agree with you. Like there's different layers to it, and depending on how you see it, the longer you're going to want to hold it.
absolutely. Hey, Jor, thank you so much for joining, man. I really appreciate your time here. That was
Anytime,
great.
man. It was awesome talking with you. Anytime you want to have me on, two Canadians here talking about the greatest asset that's ever existed, I'd love to be on. And I want to have you on my show one day too, as former
Absolutely.
nerds, former CPAs.
Yes. Two financial professionals who got away from the matrix. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate your time.
Thanks
Have
for
a
having
great
me.
rest of your day, man.
Gotcha.